The moment Yuzo put on the mask, his surroundings blurred. He was no longer in his room but standing in a vast, empty field under a blood-red sky. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by a faint whisper. Asterisk, you seek answers, but are you ready to pay the price? Asterisk. Yuzo turned, and before him stood a figure cloaked in shadows, its face hidden. The voice seemed to come from all around him, deep and hollow. He knew instantly that this was no ordinary vision. This was something else, something ancient. Is my father sick because of the mask? Yuzo asked, his voice trembling. The figure didn't move. Asterisk, the mask reveals futures, but it also takes what it desires. Every vision you change, something must be given in return. Asterisk. Yuzo's heart sank. His father's sudden illness wasn't a coincidence. It was the mask's doing. Then how do I fix it? How do I save him? He demanded, stepping closer to the figure. The shadowy figure seemed to consider him for a moment before speaking again. Asterisk, to save your father, you must give the mask what it wants. Asterisk. Yuzo's breath caught in his throat. And what does it want? Asterisk, something precious. Something you cannot take back. Asterisk. A cold shiver ran down Yuzo's spine. He could feel the weight of the figure's words, their gravity pressing down on him. I'll give anything, Yuzo said, his voice barely a whisper. Just save my father. The figure extended its hand, and in it appeared a glowing orb, pulsing with a dim light. Asterisk, you must give up something close to your heart. If you choose wrong, the consequences will be severe. But be warned, boy. Once you offer something, you can never change it back. Asterisk. The field around Yuzo began to dissolve, and he found himself back in his room, panting and covered in sweat. The mask lay in his lap, silent now, as if nothing had happened. But he knew what he had to do. The next day, Yuzo couldn't focus on anything. His mind was consumed by the figure's words. He didn't understand how to offer something to the mask, but he knew he had to try. He couldn't bear to lose his father. Every time he thought of his father lying unconscious in the hospital bed, guilt twisted inside him. That evening, Yuzo stood in front of the mask, staring at it as though it held all the answers. He felt helpless, trapped. His brother Emeka, his mother, everyone depended on him now, even if they didn't know it. He picked up the mask once again, steeling himself for whatever was to come. He put it on. This time the vision came faster. Yuzo found himself back in the ancient marketplace he'd first seen when he touched the mask. But this time the place felt different. Darker, more threatening. He walked through the narrow streets until he reached the center of the marketplace, where the cloaked figure awaited him again. You have made your choice, the figure said, its voice echoing. Asterisk, now, you must decide what you will sacrifice. Asterisk. Yuzo felt a lump form in his throat. What could he possibly offer? His thoughts raced, but his heart kept returning to one thing. His memories, his past, his connection to the people he loved. I'll give my memories, Yuzo said quietly. Take away my memories of my father if it means saving him. The figure didn't respond for a moment, and Yuzo could feel his chest tighten. Then, slowly, the figure nodded. Asterisk, it will be done. But remember, you will lose more than just your memories. You will lose the bond, the connection that ties you to him. You will become a stranger to your own father. Asterisk. Yuzo hesitated. The thought of losing the memories of his father was unbearable. But what choice did he have? He couldn't let him die. I understand, Yuzo said, his voice breaking. Do it. The figure raised its hand, and Yuzo felt a cold, hollow sensation wash over him, as if something deep inside him was being torn away. His memories, the laughter, the warmth, the lessons his father had taught him, slipped away one by one. It was painful, not physically but emotionally. He could feel himself losing pieces of his identity, pieces of who he was. Then it was over. Yuzo stood alone in the dark marketplace, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a heavy cloak. He knew what he had sacrificed, but it was too late to take it back. When Yuzo woke up the next morning, he felt different. Hollow. He couldn't remember why. It was as if a part of him had vanished. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't grasp what it was. At the hospital, the doctors told Yuzo and his family that his father had miraculously recovered. He was awake, talking, and expected to make a full recovery. Relief washed over his mother and Emika, but Yuzo stood there, numb. He watched his father from the doorway, but he couldn't feel anything. His father smiled at him, and for a brief moment, Yuzo tried to force a smile back. But there was nothing there. No recognition, no warmth, just an empty void where the memories of his father used to be. As they drove home, Yuzo stared out the window, his heart heavy with the realization of what he had lost. He had saved his father, but at what cost? And just as Yuzo thought the nightmare was over, a familiar voice whispered in his ear. Asterisk, you have paid your price, but the mask will always want more. Asterisk. The days that followed were filled with a strange sense of emptiness for Yuzo. His father was back home, fully recovered, laughing and joking like nothing had ever happened. But Yuzo couldn't join in. Whenever his father spoke to him, it felt like talking to a stranger. His father's voice didn't spark the warmth or familiarity it once had. It was as if a curtain had fallen between them, and Yuzo was on the other side, unable to break through. Every time his father smiled at him, a sharp ache twisted inside Yuzo. He had saved him, but the price had been too high. He could no longer remember what it felt like to love his father, and it hurt more than he could have imagined. Worse still, the mask's presence lingered in the back of his mind like a shadow that refused to leave. The voice of the cloaked figure echoed in his thoughts. Asterisk, the mask will always want more. Asterisk. At school, Yuzo tried to push the thoughts away. He avoided the mask as best as he could, shoving it into a corner of his room and covering it with books and clothes. But the weight of what he had done hung over him, making it hard to focus. He became quiet, withdrawn, distant from his friends and family. Even Chaik, who was grateful to Yuzo for saving him, noticed the change. One afternoon after school, Chaik cornered him in the hallway. Yuzo, are you okay? You've been acting weird since that day. Yuzo forced a smile. I'm fine, Chaik. Just tired, that's all. But Chaik wasn't convinced. You don't seem fine. If something's bothering you, you can tell me. We're friends. Friends. Yuzo had almost forgotten what that felt like too. Since the day he sacrificed his memories of his father, everything seemed distant. He couldn't explain it to Chaik. No one would understand. The mask, the visions, the price he had paid. It was all too unreal. I'll be fine, Yuzo said quickly, brushing past Chaik. Don't worry about it. But as the days went on, Yuzo couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The mask's presence in his life felt heavier, more intrusive, like a shadow creeping closer every time he tried to forget about it. He began having nightmares, visions of the cloaked figure standing at the edge of his bed, whispering in the dark. The mask will always want more, it said over and over, its voice like cold wind in his ear. One night, Yuzo woke up in a cold sweat, his heart racing. He sat up in bed, breathing hard, and for a moment everything seemed normal. But then he heard it, a soft whisper like a faint breeze passing through his room. Yuzo. He froze. The voice was unmistakable, and it wasn't coming from his mind. It was real. Slowly, he turned his head toward the corner of the room, where the mask lay buried under his clothes. The whisper came again, louder this time. Asterisk. Yuzo, come to me. Asterisk. His hands trembled as he got out of bed, his feet moving toward the mask before his mind could stop them. He reached down and uncovered it, staring at the dark, ancient carvings on its surface. The mask seemed to pulse with a strange energy, its power pulling at him. Come wear me again, the voice urged, softer now, almost pleading. Yuzo's heart pounded in his chest, fear gripping him like ice. He didn't want to put the mask on again. He had already lost so much because of it. But the pull was irresistible. He could feel the mask calling to him, and despite every instinct screaming at him to stop, his fingers closed around it. As soon as Yuzo touched the mask, the world shifted. He found himself in a dark, narrow hallway, the walls lined with flickering candles. The air was thick, heavy, and oppressive. At the far end of the hallway, the cloaked figure stood waiting. "You cannot run from me, Yuzo," the figure said, its voice echoing down the hall. Asterisk, the mask and I are one. You have tasted its power, and now it will consume you. Asterisk. No, Yuzo shouted, backing away. I don't want this. I never wanted this. The figure took a step closer, and the candles flickered as if in response to its presence. Asterisk, the mask has shown you the future. You have altered fate. But fate is not something you can change without consequences. You have only begun to pay the price, Yuzo. Asterisk. Yuzo's hands clenched into fists. I already gave up my memories. I lost my father. What more could you want from me? The figure's dark, hollow eyes seemed to bore into him. Asterisk, the mask is never satisfied with just one sacrifice. It hungers for more of your heart, your soul, your life. You cannot escape its grasp. Asterisk. Desperation clawed at Yuzo's chest. I won't let it take anything else from me, he cried. The figure stepped forward, its voice a cold, chilling whisper. Asterisk, you don't have a choice. You are bound to the mask now, Yuzo. And it will not stop until it has consumed you entirely. Asterisk. The hallway dissolved into darkness, and Yuzo was suddenly back in his room, the mask still clutched in his hands. His heart raced, and his skin was cold with sweat. He dropped the mask as if it had burned him, his breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. The mask's pull was stronger than ever now. It wouldn't let him go. He could feel it, lurking in the corner of his mind, waiting, watching. And as Yuzo sat there in the darkness, trembling, a terrifying thought took hold of him. What if the mask had already claimed more of him than he realized? What if it wasn't just his memories of his father that were gone, but pieces of himself? He didn't know how to stop it. But deep down, Yuzo knew one thing for sure. The mask wasn't done with him yet.